Can do is more than just an attitude. Can do is unwavering support in challenging times. It's the expertise to try to minimize risk while maximizing opportunities. Can do is being right here for you through every eventuality. Can do is Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management. Visit candowealth.com to see how we can help you build your wealth with confidence. Investment involves risk, and you may not get back what you invest. It's not suitable for everyone.
It's the week ending Saturday, the 22nd of October, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt U-turning on almost all of Liz Truss's economic programme, Grant Shapps becoming Britain's new Home Secretary after his predecessor's resignation/sacking, and with some inevitability, the resignation of the Prime Minister after only 6 weeks in power. But we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the week's digital team, it's Jamie Timson from BBC Sport, journalist Emma Smith, and the man who follows me from podcast to podcast, my enabler, Arion McNicoll. Okay, Arion, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This was the week that second-hand goods were handed a second chance.
I make up to £2,000 a week on Depop, and this is how I do it. This year I can earn up to 50k. I source the best of the best vintage clothes. So Fifi's Closet has 183,000 followers. Making money is really addictive.
I make 50k a year selling vintage clothes. I mean, I don't, obviously. Look at me. But that is the title of the video from Channel 4. And we heard there from Depop user Fifi's Closet. Arion, for those who don't know, what is Depop? And what's your story of the week?
So Depop is a site on which you can resell anything you want. It's kind of a mix between Instagram and, say, eBay, where you can build up a following as Fifi's Closet has done, and then try to sell different items to your followers.
Okay, so kind of eBay if it had been invented in the era of mobile first.
Exactly right, yeah. But the story this week is that a new study has come out which has found that demand for second-hand goods in the UK is massively surging. And according to the study, which was conducted by a consultancy called the Centre for Economics and Business Research, the company's so-called pre-loved economy has grown to an estimated 6.5 billion this year, which is a jump of almost 50% since just 2 years ago. And the same study anticipated that it's going to double again in the next 5 years to 12.6 billion, which is a not insubstantial chunk of the country's GDP.
Okay. Can I just intervene to say, on behalf of everyone who finds the phrase pre-loved irritating, I hear you and I feel your pain. But charity shop fashion, pre-owned clothes, second-hand markets, that's been a growing trend for ages, hasn't it? What's really new here?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what's really new is that it's been turbocharged by the advent of online resale sites like, say, Depop. But there are several reasons that are going on behind this leap in popularity for second-hand purchases, quite aside from the invention of these sites. And one is that, according to this survey for sellers, 46% of respondents said that they were interested in getting extra income. That was the main driver behind their decision. And similarly for buyers, 2/3 of people said that buying secondhand was a bid to reduce their expenses. So on both sides of the equation, it's about getting more bang for your buck.
So, Emma, is that good for the economy or bad for the economy?
I guess it's a bit of both. I mean, the fact is that anything that's getting people to spend money is good. And given that sort of we're currently facing a cost of living crisis, and a lot of the people who are getting involved in sort of buying and selling on Depop and similar websites are often younger people with less disposable income. Anything that's sort of good, that's encouraging people to buy and sell is good. But on the other hand, obviously it sort of drives people to these secondhand and away sort of from the traditional sort of high streets, and it's putting more pressure on sort of the physical shops. So it's one of those things which has both sort of pros and cons to it. But
yeah, so good maybe for sort of cash flow around the economy, Jamie, but bad for shops if what Emma says is true. But we have seen some efforts, haven't we, from the high street chains, for example, to try and capitalize on this trend. I've seen M&S kind of make noises about this. Should that be bigger? Should you walk into John Lewis and see half a wall of refurbished computers rather than new ones?
Yeah, I think I actually do all of my shopping primarily, I would say now, for new clothes from Depop. And this, like, one of a rather fetching jumper that I'm wearing today that unfortunately listeners can only imagine is actually from Depop as well. And primarily the reasons that I do it is because I think there's a sustainable thing. So you're not buying new stuff. So it's all stuff that I already know is kind of already out there. So there's an environmental angle. And then there's also the other side of it, which is that you can just get real bargains. You can buy what were designer goods at a much, much lower price. When you're reading around this topic, what you do find interesting is the kind of ethical situation where there's a lot of people now going into charity shops and picking up stuff from charity shops at a very low price and then selling it on Depop for a lot of money.
Yeah.
And a bit like the person that was in the video about making 50k a year.
Yeah, so what's the ethics on that? Because that, you're obviously giving the charity the same money they would have made anyway, I guess, and then making some more for yourself. So you can look at it like that. Doesn't feel right.
Yeah, no, exactly. Is it the kind of entrepreneurialism that the Tories are all out there trying to get us involved in, starting out? You're taking advantage of the market, or are you actually just taking advantage of charity shops and the fact that they maybe aren't as in tune with Depop, except, and then on the flip side, because balance, I'm all about balance. On the other side, charity shops are getting involved with Depop, and you are seeing charity shops actually set up pages on Depop or Retro
and selling it
themselves,
yeah.
which is probably what we want to go down.
Arion, you're from Australia. It's one of your many virtues on the show. You can give us an international angle here. Are we late to the party in Britain? Is second-hand booming everywhere?
Well, I actually don't know about the story in Australia. What I did find is that it's booming in the United States, where secondhand clothing in particular is expected to be twice the size of the fast fashion industry by the year 2030. And similarly, apparently, since 2019, secondhand markets in China have been growing massively. India has a long tradition of both recycling and upcycling. So there is an international story that I think is more complex than just the thing that we've got going on here right now. But I think it is interesting that in the UK we're seeing this coincide, I suppose, with a moment where people are looking to cut back on their expenses while also simultaneously having this greater environmental sense of the necessity of reusing rather than just tossing things away. And if you think about, say, the growing market for cars, that's one of the largest components of secondhand, according to this poll. That one of the things that's going on there is there's this ongoing global shortage of semiconductors and other vehicle parts that's caused the delay for manufacturers to bring their own new cars to market. And that means that people just cannot get new in that particular product category. And so they're going to the secondhand market because that's the place that they can actually get a car. So I think that there's also a supply question going on, at least in that area.
And the sustainability thing that Jamie raised is interesting, isn't it, Emma? Because it means that people can feel good, I guess, about these sort of thrift store style purchases that in the past had a certain stigma around them. It's a place you go when you need a handout. The feeling for Gen Z is more like, this is an investment in a piece that I like. It's cool and it's better for the environment than buying new.
Absolutely. You may veil against the term pre-loved, but there's a reason why the term pre-loved is now used. It's because these things used to be called second-hand, and second-hand has this sort of classist sort of element of snobby around it. The idea that sort of you look down on charity shops as sort of like only a certain type of person would use them. But the fact is that that's obviously something that's now evolved into this sort of pre-loved phenomenon. And certainly we talk about sort of younger generation being more socially conscious, more aware of things around the environment. There are plenty of reasons why people are now turning to this and turning against things like fast fashion and stuff like that. There's elements of necessity around sort of having to, spend less money on clothes, be more conscious of the environment. But the fact is there's less stigma around buying things secondhand, pre-loved, whatever term you want to use. And I think that can only be a good thing.
Well, I want to use the term secondhand, and the reason for that, Jamie, is not that I'm a snob, but, well, I mean, you can draw your own conclusions, but that I feel like pre-loved is actually inaccurate. Like, the truth is, a lot of people kind of use something once, throw it away, and instead of throwing it away, okay, they're uploading it to the internet and getting some cash, but that's not necessarily a counter to fast fashion. And it's not that they loved it, it's that they maybe even hated it and want to get rid of it. And actually, in a way, it could accelerate the problem of fast fashion.
I think there's, if we're on this, pre-love on the pre-love freeway, I think we probably do need to have a look at whether, I think there's lots of different angles to take at it. And one of them, I really hope that we keep in the pre-love freeway. That was the only thing I was thinking about the whole time. I think there's lots of different angles to come at it. And one of the interesting things is about inclusion and inclusivity with a lot of secondhand and this pre-loved fashion in a way that a lot of the stuff that comes out of the 80s and 90s actually didn't, there's not that many plus size goods that people are using. And actually, if you go on Depop, it can be quite difficult to source plus sizes. So it's perhaps not as an inclusive pastime as you'd imagine. And then there's also like a really interesting interview with the Beyond Retro guy. So Beyond Retro is a charity shop that started up it's a vintage shop actually that started up in Shoreditch. And it's now gone from strength to strength. And he was talking about how he now lives off grid in California somewhere. And he was talking about how actually the intersection between what you're saying about, fast fashion and a lot of the things that are in fashion now are from the 80s and 90s when fast fashion came about. So there is a lot of waste still. And even something like Beyond Retro, which is it is still causing a problem in terms of carbon. And that's why he's gone off grid, is to try and balance it out. So I think as much as I would say that, I'm being virtuous by using Depop, we have to also be aware that it does still fulfill, some of the problems that we've always seen with clothing and the manufacturing of goods in that way.
I think also this question of our feeling about, even the terminology shifting from secondhand to pre-loved, I think that people broadly in the UK have begun to get over perhaps the stigma associated with owning secondhand goods. And you take, for example, electronics, where up until I would say comparatively recently, there's been a sort of cachet in having the latest Apple iPhone or MacBook or whatever it is. And I think that is starting to fade away, particularly when you look at, say, the rise of this new company that people may have seen being advertised around. It's actually a French company that has become the most valuable private VC-backed company in France. It's this huge startup that's grown to be worth 5.7 billion. And it's an online marketplace for refurbished consumer electronics.
Although you've got to be a savvy shopper, haven't you, Emma? I mean, that name. I mean, back market is literally a pun on black market. Is there a risk that when you buy online, you're more likely to become the victim of fraud? You don't know what you're buying. How do you verify it?
Yeah, there is certainly an element that if you're buying something online, you can't see who you're buying it off. You often can't see the exact item that you're buying. There is, so much more inherent risk still in buying things online than there are in person. And I think that what that does is it pushes people more towards companies that they sort of trust the reputation, and pushes them towards things like Amazon, which obviously is naturally a home for sort of a lot of secondhand goods. And obviously we know all about sort of the issues that Amazon's swallowing up the business of high street stores and smaller businesses is causing. We heard at the start about these sort of individuals who've managed to make tens of thousands of pounds sort of selling pre-loved items on Depop or whatever. I think that they're very much the exception to the rule, and that establishing yourself as a trustworthy source is going to be something that's going to be for selling these things is going to be even more difficult to do in the future.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to end up with like made in China knockoffs of vintage fashions pretending to be second-hand, then it all comes full circle, doesn't it?
That's already happening. In China, there's this huge production of vintage watches with kind of inbuilt scratches and patina and signs of aging because, the resale watch market is so enormous. And obviously, wherever there's money to be made, savvy entrepreneurial types will get involved. So, yeah, it's happening.
I think as well, it goes back to, and Emma was making a great point there, and I think it makes sense of actually we do need people like John Lewis and the big brands, the people that are the kind of institutions to start doing more reused or recycled stuff, because there are a huge number of people that just won't go on Depop, the less technologically savvy, the older generations, but they will go to M&S and potentially maybe they'll have a conversation about sustainability if they go in there and they see something that's being reused or whatever. So actually there should be an imperative on the bigger brands to get involved in it.
Okay. Producer Sophie in my ear is anxious that we credit Selfridges and River Island for doing exactly that, apparently. So there we go. There's some hope. Okay, Emma, I'm coming to you after this.
Can do is more than just an attitude. Can do is unwavering support in challenging times. It's the expertise to try to minimize risk while maximizing opportunities. Can do is being right here for you through every eventuality. Can do is Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management. Visit candowealth.com to see how we can help you build your wealth with confidence. Investment involves risk, and you may not get back what you invest. It's not suitable for everyone.
So, Emma, your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This was the week in which the rugby union mall collapsed.
I think some drastic change needs to happen. And unfortunately, I think rugby's been faffing around for too long and skirting around this issue. And there's too many sort of people in charge. Well, too many people pretending to be in charge, but no one actually knows who is in charge and making the right decisions.
Former Wasps player James Haskell speaking to Sky Sports News on Monday. Emma, what was he talking about?
So this week, Wasps, which is one of the oldest and most illustrious rugby union clubs in the English leagues, was forced into administration with the loss of 167 jobs and sort of the annulment of their results this season and their relegation from the top division for next season, should they be able to financially form a club for next season.
And was this a surprise? Because it had been known for a while that they've been struggling, hadn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of the conclusion of what had sort of looked to be quite inevitable for a period of time. But what's even more sort of worrying about this is the fact that they're the second top division English rugby union team to go bust in the last 21 days. Earlier this month, another Premiership team, Worcester Warriors, were liquidated. Both teams will be relegated. Both have uncertain futures in rugby union, and hundreds of people have either lost their jobs or facing losing their jobs.
Yeah, but I don't understand quite how that works. I understand that obviously the business wasn't able to survive in its current state, and so, there needed to be a process. But the fans that are Wasps fans still exist. The players still literally exist. I mean, what might happen next?
May well happen next is that Wasps may well be bought out and the club is able to sort of re-enter the English rugby union pyramid at a reasonable level. But what is likely to happen is that these players, will have to find alternative clubs, alternative employment, and the fans of these teams are left bereft without a team to follow. Previously, when teams have gone bust, for example, in English football, fans have formed sort of phoenix clubs at the very bottom of the professional pyramid or in the sort of amateur leagues. But their options are extremely limited because they are fans and players without a club.
Jamie, why do you think this is happening?
I mean, there's a load of different reasons. You can go all the way back to professionalisation of the sport in 1997, and there was a real feeling that when it went professional, there would be a lot of money, and we've not really seen that trickle down. It's definitely not the game's fault. I'm a massive rugby fan, and this season has been some of the most exciting rugby that anyone. I cannot underline how important, if you do like rugby, to go down and see your local team is. But the Gallagher Premiership particularly has seen some amazing results and some amazing score lines. A lot of the Wasps fans or people behind the club will say that it's related to COVID. But if you dig down into the detail, this is because the Premiership doesn't have a fit and proper persons test for ownership of clubs. Basically, they ended up taking on a team that had some sort of failing revenues, and COVID obviously exacerbated them. But then they tried to buy a stadium, leveraging money that they didn't have to buy a new stadium to move Wasps away from London. They now play in Coventry, or they used to play in Coventry, and they moved them away from London and took on all of the costs of the Coventry stadium without any real plans for how they were going to pay for it. And actually, a fit and proper persons test would have saved this from happening, and it's a massive shame.
I mean, Arion, Jamie says the game is not at fault, but I mean, just purely mathematically, it is in the sense, isn't it, that if the sport was more popular, then it would be able to subsidise itself.
I think that's right, actually. And, the simple reason behind this massive crisis is that rugby union pays its players more than the sport can afford. And unless attendances double or television suddenly decides to offer huge sums more, it's hard to see either the salaries rise or individual teams become, if not profitable, at least able to support and sustain themselves. And this has lots and lots of knock-on effects. It means less talent being drawn into the league, as well as even the game itself. And people who are thinking professional thoughts about sport might be tempted to go in other more lucrative directions. But also, this has seen intervention at the highest level, and rugby bosses are going to face a parliamentary committee next month to address the game's financial crisis. So, this is actually drawing attention, quite aside from everything that Jamie is talking about the necessity of having, fit and proper people in charge of the individual clubs. I think the overarching hierarchy also needs to be looked at.
It's not the game's fault. A lot of at the very top level, everything is sold out. Absolutely everything is sold out. I'm going to the World Cup next year in France to support Scotland for all my failings. And I had to sit and click through. It was worse than Glastonbury to try and get tickets. So there is at the very top level a desire to go and watch the game. It just doesn't trickle down because of the way that the game is structured. It's got nothing to do with how good the quality of the action is on the pitch. It really doesn't.
Yeah, but you're going to see it live because you're a fan. I suppose, Emma, I mean, there's a couple of things for you to respond to there in what we've just said. But before we get to that, there's also the international question, isn't there? I mean, Arion raised TV rights. In England, it can be maybe quite hard to lose sight of how unpopular it is around the world, because in England it is talked about, but in the rest of the world, they watch football, they watch cricket, apart from obviously, Australia and New Zealand, they don't really watch rugby, do they?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not, it doesn't have sort of the global sort of appeal of football, for example, but then again, nothing really does.
No, but nor cricket, nor basketball, I mean, it's a long way down the list, isn't it?
It's the same as cricket. It's got the same number of as teams that play it as cricket, if not more. Cricket's not a good analogy.
Yeah, but cricket's got all of India and Pakistan watching it.
Yeah, but rugby union has all of sort of France and a lot of Italy and South Africa as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also growing in Argentina, South America. Chile are in the World Cup next year.
Okay, so what can they do, Emma, to boost revenues?
So I think that there has sort of, Jamie does raise the point, sort of that obviously that for the Rugby Union World Cup, tickets are hugely, in demand, and rugby people are following rugby union every 4 years. When England got to the final in Japan, it was a big deal. But then you sort of go it's a case of trying to attract those people to the day-to-day, to the league matches, and that's obviously been a struggle. And clubs have spent huge amounts of money trying to sort of sign the best players and sort of attract people to these league fixtures, and have ended up sort of leaving themselves with huge insurmountable debts. When the RFU chief executive Bill Sweeney was asked about this, said that clubs were living beyond means, losing up to £5 million a year pre-COVID and more ever since. Worcester, when they were wound up in High Court, had debts of £25 million, including £6 million in unpaid tax. I mean, these are staggering figures, and it's because outside of sort of the Six Nations, the Rugby Union World Cup, these big events, audiences has chased these sort of the attention that the England team, the international game, gets every year, every few years, and simply haven't found it, and with huge consequences.
I think also Jamie, with the greatest respect, you're sort of conflating the popularity of the international game with the domestic game, and it's weird about rugby union that it doesn't have the same national-based followings. I mean, there are obviously followings because for years domestic competitions have existed in countries around the world, but people are hugely enthusiastic about it, just like you, about going to international rugby World Cups, but they seem less keen to support their local team. And you look at the situation in Australia where, again, up until probably the early 2000s, Australia had a really dominant and popular international team, but we've only ever been able to muster a handful of teams across this enormous landmass. So if a place like Australia can't build a successful local competition, and you do have Super Rugby there, then, how are you going to do it elsewhere?
But you know as well as I do, Arion, that in Australia you have to compete with rugby league, which is a massive sport, and it's amongst the working classes. And if you're going to pick between rugby league and rugby union, which is effectively, even though they're not the same sport, very similar sports, and one is incredibly well paid and incredibly sought after and the other isn't, you're going to pick rugby league. And in Australia particularly, it's a public school sport. It's basically solely played in public schools, which is a real issue when it comes to getting people involved and doing it. And I just want to pick up about the domestic thing, because you say that I'm conflating domestic and national. And actually the Heineken Cup, as it used to be known, but the European Champions Cup, which is like their equivalent of the Champions League, has huge numbers of people going to go and watch it in the UK. And the URC, which is like the European, so it's got South Africa, Italy, Scotland, Welsh, Irish teams in it, they actually aren't going through the same issues that the Premiership is. So it isn't about the fact that people don't want to go and watch the game. It's literally about the way it's structured.
Okay, 2 final questions for Emma. Firstly, just respond to Jamie's previous point about the fit and proper person test. Do you think there's something in that? Do you think that the way forward on this might be a little bit more scrutiny on who owns rugby clubs? And secondly, I'd just like you to sort of guess, really, predict, we're all about implications, what you think might happen next.
So in terms of fit and proper persons test, I absolutely agree that something like that is 100% necessary. Worcester director of rugby, Steve Diamond, talks about the ship has sunk with the captains nowhere to be seen. I think it's very much a case that both Worcester and Wasps have been sort of led very poorly with very poor financial decisions. And I mean, the Premiership rugby chief, Simon Massey-Taylor, he was asked if this could happen to more clubs, and he said that he couldn't give a direct answer about clubs' financial status, because there is no centralised oversight. There is a real risk, that something like this could happen again. And I mean, it's quite staggering, really, that I know rugby union isn't as big a sport as football in the UK or elsewhere, but the fact is, Wasps are 4-time Premiership winners. They're 2-time European champions. They were Premiership ever presence ever since the league was founded in the 1980s. I mean, this is the rugby equivalent of something like Chelsea going under. I mean, it is one of the biggest clubs.
Okay, and so what do you think is going to happen next? More?
I mean, the fact is that if Wasps can go under, pretty much any English team could go under. There are some moves to try and head this off. For example, the Gallagher Premiership's expanded to 13 teams in 2021, and this has basically been seen as sort of a tipping point alongside COVID as being a reason for why the league has sort of overstretched, too many games, too many resources stretched too sort of thinly. A reduction in the number of teams. A move to a 10-team league from 2024 has been mooted, and I think that's likely to happen, and I think that's a good start. It's incredible that it's taken 2 top division teams to go out of business for English Rugby Union to try and get its house in order. But there are signs that is going to be the case.
Okay, Emma, thank you for that. Jamie, you're up next after this. Okay, Jamie, your turn. You're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This was the week that brought new meaning to the phrase stitched up like a kipper.
We witnessed one of the most disgusting, dishonest acts that the fishing world has ever seen in live time. There's always been stories about dishonesty and competition, but I personally have never seen anything quite like this.
Jamie Fisher, director of the Lake Erie Walleye Trail Fishing Tournament, in an ITV News report from earlier this month. It's all come to a head this week. Jamie, what was he so angry about?
I mean, he is absolutely disgusted, and he's quite right to be disgusted, because in a recent Ohio fishing tournament, 2 anglers were found stuffing their fish with lead weights and other fish fillets in order to win over $29,000. And it's a serious matter because they've been indicted this week and charged and potentially face up to 12 months in jail for basically stealing the winning, stealing the prize money from the tournament.
So 12 months in prison, potentially not for putting lead weights into fish. They literally opened up the fish and put lead weights in, but because by so doing, they could have won they were going to win the grand prize. Yeah.
They did, yeah, and that whole video, I really urge people to go and look at this, go and watch the video, because it's stunning. These people are cutting open fish, and you're seeing lead weights fall out of them. They're pulling out other fish fillets, which is, I mean, quite barbaric. Pulling out like fish fillets from these fish, and the disgust in the voice of the person that's filming it, because you just don't do this in fishing. I mean, you and I know that fishing is it's all about integrity, and you just don't do this. But I bring this to you as a story because
there's a grander point. Who knew this was building up to a thesis?
Absolutely. Well, this is the kind of and finally bit on the show, so I feel like we can move around and make some wild points. But
people will notice the segue from serious Jamie to joking Jamie.
Over the last few weeks, we've seen cheating scandals erupt in what I'm going to term, and I don't think anyone else will, the big five: chess, fishing, which we've talked about, poker, Irish dancing, and Fat Bear Week.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot to unpick. Can we just jump to Fat Bear Week? Because otherwise, throughout the rest of the conversation, it'll just be niggling me in the back of my brain. Ask about the bears. How's cheating affected Fat Bear Week? What is Fat Bear Week?
Well, good. These are all excellent questions, Ollie. In Alaska, they have a tournament each year called Fat Bear Week, where photos of some big and beautiful bears around the state are then put up on the internet, and people are able to vote on their favourites. Unfortunately, what happened this year was there was irregularities in the voting, something that we sadly know all too well about from a political persuasion. But this time it turned out that someone had been rigging. Thousands of votes came in for one of the bears very late on from similar IP addresses. And once again, the integrity of the whole thing was called into question. Luckily, they caught the action before it happened, and the rightful owner, Bear 747, won Fat Bear Week. So,
is it because he's the size of a 747?
I believe so. I believe so. Sadly,
I mean, before we get you to tell us the story of every single one of these scandals, we'll move back to your thesis in a minute. I should spread the love a little bit. Emma, why don't you tell us about the poker one? Have you seen that footage? There's a similar potential poker rigging story.
Yes. So there was a case on the World Poker Tour where Garrett Adelstein accused a competitor, Robbie Jade Liu, of cheating during a match in late September. Adelstein made the accusation after losing a head-to-head battle with Liu, who won $269,000 with a weak hand.
Wow. So you're now talking about big money, aren't you? That's not fish money, is it? $269,000.
Yeah, this is when it sort of becomes. I don't wish to degrade sort of fishing or Fat Bear Week, but when you go talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds, things become much more serious. Basically, Lou was wearing sort of quite large jewelry, a large ring on her finger, and the accusation was that there was sort of like vibrating sort of like signals being sent about when to sort of play certain hands.
And that, Arion, obviously is reminiscent of a recent scandal in chess. I don't know why I want to come to you to discuss anal beads, but tell us about that.
Yes. Well, so I'm glad you've come to me on this very important point. But yes, so Hans Niemann, this young and quite controversial grandmaster, was accused of cheating when he beat Magnus Carlsen, who has long been the dominant force in international chess, due, some people say, to having used vibrating anal beads that he had squirreled in the obvious place to receive signals from a supercomputer, thus knowing the correct move to make in sort of crucial moments of the match. Carlsen withdrew from this huge competition. It's called the Cinquefield Cup, and its prize money is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, we are again talking about big money here, and this is probably the biggest and most legitimate of the sports and questions, apart from Fat Bear Week. Obviously, that's
we haven't got onto the Irish dancing yet. Who knows how vibrators can penetrate that?
But the story rumbled on when, first of all, Neiman offered to have a match against Carlsen completely naked, which I don't know what he was hoping to prove, given that what was being accused was a sort of internal method of cheating rather than anything like the sort of poker thing that someone was wearing.
It's a family show. Let's leave the rest to people's imaginations. Jamie, what happened with Irish dancing briefly, and then we can start to unpick this.
Basically, it turns out, or it has been alleged that the biggest schools Irish dance championships in Ireland has been fixed by. There's been a question about sexual favours being exchanged in return for high scores within the Irish dancing.
Okay, so more straight up corruption there, really.
Yes.
So a variety of different types of cheating happening in a variety of different events. You've brought them all together. You present them to us, Jamie. I mean, what is the grand thesis here? People are cheating more. Why?
Well, there's lots of different theories. You'll be surprised to know.
We'll choose one. And argue it with conviction, please.
You'll be surprised to know that people haven't actually nailed down one. But there is one school of thought that basically is looking at COVID and the pandemic, and people coming out of the pandemic needing either financial pressure, so more pressure to cheat in order to earn some more money, or also that we just have basically lost some of our morality from having to spend so much time in lockdown and away from other human beings. I would just say the chess one is a bit different, because the fact that he's potentially using technology and computers in chess has really gone to the heart of what a lot of people worry about AI and about technology, which is that when they start to be able to influence so many different things, from the beauty of chess to, one day potentially they'll be able to write prize-winning novels, will we as a society have to take a step back and be like, oh God, this isn't great for us anymore? Because people do feel really, really hurt by the chess one.
You're painting in broad brushstrokes on a delightful canvas, Jamie, but I'm keen to focus down on this. Is cheating becoming more widespread thing? I mean, Emma, you are a sports journalist. Is cheating becoming more widespread? Do you think that it is something that you were going to see in more mainstream sports than fishing and chess even?
I don't know about becoming more widespread. I mean, the fact is that you've got stories of cheating throughout the entire history of sport. And the fact is that people don't love cheats, but they love a story of cheating. Like, they love people trying to cheat in inventive ways. I mean, people like the idea of sort of having sort of like electronic sort of signals or buzzers, whatever it may put me in mind of, like Boris Onyshchenko, who you might remember as the guy who in fencing in the 1976 Olympics rigged up his sword so he could press a buzzer so he could sort of get points without touching his opponent. The fact is that stories like, people remember cheats, they remember sort of infamous cheating scandals. Name a famous cyclist, most people would say Lance Armstrong. Name who won the 1988 men's 100 meters. People might not be able to give you the winner, but they'd be able to name you Ben Johnson. I don't think cheating has become more widespread, but certainly people remember it. It's something that, people are always drawn to as a story. I mean, I can't say in my career as a sports journalist I've covered a huge amount of chess, and neither have many of my BBC Sport colleagues. But the fact is, a story giving a background on the Neiman-Magnus Carlsen sort of saga, and it got hundreds of thousands of views. Like, people are really sort of like intrigued by this.
It was the particular combination of keywords, I would argue, around that story.
Yeah. Well, yes, maybe that too.
Arion, I wonder as well whether it belongs to the political climate that we're in too. If you're in an environment where Donald Trump is the president of the United States and Boris Johnson is the prime minister of Britain, and there's documented examples of them flagrantly lying to advance themselves, and yet they manage to remain in post, sort of, for a while. Does that influence the way we think about everything? Do people think, well, it's not that big a deal, it's just a silly competition, it's not serious stuff, look what the politicians are doing?
Potentially, and I think particularly if you bring together this particular grouping of cheating stories, for the most part, I would say most people think that they're lesser competitions in their own right, that the importance of whether Fat Bear Week has 747 or Holly as the winner, that doesn't really matter. I saw an interview in the Washington Post a few years ago with a chap called Amos Shur, who's a professor of psychology at Ben Gurion University in Israel. And what he was saying was that when people succeed in competition against others, it compromises their ethics and makes them more likely to cheat afterwards. And he actually ran these interesting experiments which showed that people who win more are more likely to become more entitled, and that entitlement leads to this sort of increasing dishonesty. So you could probably draw some connections between the sort of dishonesty, the growing dishonesty of the political moment, and this sense that perhaps the people at the top of any particular sport or competition, that their cheating matters less because we're seeing cheating become more part of the sort of international zeitgeist. But I think that particularly with the chess story, I think there's something really interesting going on there. And it is that connection of both the sort of rise of AI in the sport, and computers now are better at playing chess than people, and this copying of the computer's best techniques. All of the top level grandmasters now study from the supercomputers and have learnt to play like them. And consequently, it's led to this massive period of extended draws. Mostly chess will end in a draw if it's played absolutely correctly. So I think that this period of almost chess becoming reductive due to AI's impact on the game has suddenly become more exciting, because suddenly you've got this really human thing going on, which is this cheating scandal. So I think it's almost kind of turbo boosted interest in the game, which is exactly what Emma's saying.
I do think that there's probably something to be said for how much now, when I was reading about all the different stuff, and they were saying how do we tackle this, where do we come in and what do we do? And actually a lot of the ways, there are studies about people, if there's an opportunity to cheat in games, if there's a pair of eyes that are watching them that can tarnish their reputation, they won't do it. And it can be as simple as like putting up CCTV or even just saying like to someone before you're playing a game or whatever, oh, we are able to check so we will know if you're cheating, and people won't do it. And potentially, part of this, kind of snowball effect of cheating is down to the fact that actually there is less connection in society between people. People feel like there's less chance of their reputation being tarnished because actually they've stopped caring as much about each other because they've gone on. And that to me is probably complete nonsense, but I've said it anyway on podcasts. So
I think that one thing that we could sort of link to across these sports to an extent back to the point about rugby union before is the fact that, certainly financial pressures are present. I mean, we started off by discussing that the phishing scandal, and on one hand, it's obviously sort of a juicy sort of story. It's like, how are they cheating with these weights and these stuffing fish inside other fish? It's fishception. But the fact is that there was a £30,000 prize on offer, and the fact is this is in a minority sport. This isn't Premier League football. £30,000 to these people is huge amounts of money. The incentive to cheat when there's so much money on offer, and £250,000 poker hands, in a way you sort of almost can't blame people, because with that sort of money on offer, those prizes on offer, the human instinct to do whatever possible to win that, so it can sometimes take over.
And with that, this week's show has now come to an end. My thanks to Arion, Emma and Jamie. You can follow the show for free. You can get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts and tap follow. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Sophie King at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.